Hey guys, this video is gonna talk a little bit about a, a discussion I've sort of been having with my professor. I take a philosophy class called, The Philosophy of Responsibility, Freedom and Responsibility, and, well, one of the questions we had to basically, self-reflect about during our midterm and kind of add our own 2 cents into it, and I decided to throw in a little bit of Alan Watts and Ken Wilber because it's talking about the development of the self in relation to the world. So I'm thinking, well, no boundary is a great way to talk about that. It's not too heavy on the integral language, and it's very philosophical. So why not? So I use a particular quote. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, it's very basic. It's one of the central ideas to no boundary. Once the primary boundary is understood to be illusory, one's sense of self envelops the all. There is then no longer anything outside of oneself, and so nowhere to draw any sort of boundary. Thus, if we can at all begin to see through the primary boundary, self and other, the sense of unity consciousness will not be far from us. And alright, so this is what I say. So I write, it's not a matter of reuniting with the world in any literal sense because we never left the world. The state of integration or unity with the world, our environment, our fellow human beings, is always true. It's just a matter of recognition of that immediate state of connection in the present moment. And I try to connect that to one of the authors are reading the class, Eric Fromm, who talks a lot about the development of the self, autonomous self versus non-autonomous and all that. But yeah, my professor replies, and this, I think, to put it shortly, represents a lot of people in traditional philosophical fields. This is like a common response to anything Eastern. Um, he writes, my professor writes in the little notes. I don't know if you can actually see it. Yeah, there you go. So he writes, this is typically Eastern/Asian outlook, which to me, he highlights, at least appears hopeless, vague, like a nebulous pantheism. And then he underlines unity consciousness and says, we are individual, unique centers of consciousness. This view, you state, seems to be presenting a loss of self, not meaning selfishness. Well, sort of, but not exactly. The next page, same thing goes down. So I write a little Watts quote. But when you know for sure that your separate ego is a fiction, you actually feel yourself as the whole process and pattern of life. Experience and experiencer become one with the experience. Known and knower, one knowing. So, I mean, I didn't go too far into this. I mean, some basic statements. He says, I can't buy that. It is literally unrealistic. And then he says, where is he saying? All right. So let's just work with that. Let's not get too heavy. So he doesn't buy it, and he sees this as nebulous pantheism. I've gotten this many times before when just trying to speak about this message forms with philosophers. I'm not attacking them. We usually agree on a lot of the stuff until I bring up Eastern philosophy, and then we start to talk about that, and then I start to roll and all this other stuff. So my question to you, whoever's listening, whether you are one of these people who consider this to be nebulous pantheism, or silly, or vague, or hopeless, I mean, I get these a lot, so they're obviously not silly claims. I mean, you can argue they're silly, but I'm wondering, what is it about those who often study Western philosophy, or study heavy analytical stuff, when they get approached with Eastern philosophy, they seem to not be able to get what it's talking about, and if they do, they seem to think that it is an abstract statement. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting question because I mean this is something that we don't necessarily have to answer. I mean, you can liken this to a Zen koan where, some philosopher's talking to a Zen monk and he's saying, why is it like this? Why is it like this? It seems silly. And all the while the monk is just chopping wood, carrying water, pouring tea and serving his host, and then, being in simplicity of the moment. I think that's really important to remember because if we're going to go down this road of trying to figure out, why Eastern and Western philosophy seem to clash at this point, I think it's very important not to get too heavy-handed, or heavy-minded, I guess, and get lost in all these ideas and thoughts and concepts. So, I think I tried to think about it, and I only came up with one thing. Um, when as a student of Western philosophy too, because I'm a philosophy minor, um, we tend to read paragraphs and statements, if we know their philosophy, like a logical equation, like a logic claim, um, and we tend to we've been trained to read philosophy like it's an equation, like it's like it has some kind of I guess you could say, yeah, like a logic equation. If p, then you know, something. All that's the logical terms. Like that is the way we're supposed to read it. So when we come across Eastern philosophy, we read it the same way, like it's some kind of equation that we have to figure out, and it makes a claim and then it backs up the claim through inductive or whatever kind of logical reasoning. And it doesn't Eastern philosophy usually doesn't end up doing it. It just makes claims like we're all one, or see through the illusion of self and other. They just say stuff like that. They don't bother trying to rationally make claims. It's not set up in the same way. But we treat it like it is, and because of that, because we could only see through this veil, this one veil of just very very linear logical thinking, it ends up looking, I guess to them it looks ridiculous, but to me I can say, like, look, I'm not going to read it like that, obviously, because it's not supposed to be read like that. I mean, any more than a more creative artistic expression is supposed to be read like a logical equation. Shakespeare is not supposed to be read like that. Most art and literature is not supposed to be read like that. So why would this need to be read like that? And the irony is, my professors would probably agree with that statement, but there seems to be some kind of block. I mean, I don't think it's mysterious as much as I think it's almost like a language thing. They're just trained not to think in that way. Yeah. So I write such descriptions. It's unfortunately, or fortunately, can't be written that way. Um, though the philosopher seeks to read them like a logic puzzle, um, he or she misses the point. And how can it be, as my professor said, unrealistic if we are directly perceiving the experience? This is not some kind of philosophical abstract claim. Often of these claims that they make in a lot of these writings are made based off of a direct perceiving of it. So they've already had this direct pantheist experience, from which they're trying to describe to you. So they're already starting from the direct experience of it. It's not some kind of abstract philosophical claim which they need to prove to you. Um, so yeah, okay. And he also tried to say that not conceptualizing or releasing our attachments to thought, because I did mention that in the essay, is impossible, because in order to even convey these words, we're using abstract thoughts. But again, I think he's taking this very literally. I think a lot of people do this. We take things too literally. It's not that we're not having thoughts. It's that we're not stuck only seeing through those thoughts. We've released our attachment to them. They still come up. We still use them. We just don't. We've broadened our ability or potential to see in different ways. So yeah, thanks for listening, and please, comments.